So for the record, it is 10:11 now, and this is a workshop that was scheduled to begin at 10 a.m. Wednesday, June 14th, 2017. We have two items. The first item is agenda item, or item A, which is an audit report, and it's for Curry County, and second report would be for the Curry County Transit District. We'll come to the second topic.
Commissioner Gold, are you on?
Topic will be following.
I'm on. Is everyone on? Commissioner Huxley?
Yep.
Oh, I'm on now.
All right. Oh, very good.
So we'll turn this over to begin with, to Louise Colstrom to make any introductions on the airport, or the audit report.
Louise Colstrom, County Accountant. So we have here today our representatives from Los Adams, Amanda, Larry Moore, and Leslie. Okay, so
That's all right. I know it's a long one.
it's a long one, and
I know, it's rough.
I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's Leslie. So they will come up in their presentation on the audits.
Do you want to, if you want to move that so that we
Oh.
can move that around so you
Good
can
idea.
sort of see the
Oh, here,
screen
I'll-
there?
Either way.
We'll just look back that
The
way.
mouse is right here.
Oh. Okay.
It's a slightly delayed mouse.
Okay, that's okay.
So wait a minute.
So you're just going to
We'll see in here, and then it'll be up there? Okay,
I
perfect.
think that's you right there.
I'm just going to turn it on the left-hand side on the bottom.
It's looking better.
Oh,
There you go.
There we go.
She did better with that than I did.
Is this okay? I feel like I'm not going to see you guys if I'm facing that way.
Just as long as you're on the TV. you're good.
Am I still on there?
Yeah, you are.
Oh, there you go.
There you go. In living color.
Right. So as Louise mentioned, I'm Amanda McCleary Moore. I'm a partner with Moss Adams. I'm located in our Medford office, and we've been working with the county for about 4 years now, and we just finished up the audit for June 30th, 2016.
And I'm Leslie Van Busker, and I also worked on the audit for about 4 years.
So the 2016 period, I think, ended prior to Commissioner Boyce and Gold's
Correct.
term.
It did.
Okay.
It did.
Yep.
It did. So
And Louis Paul.
yeah. So we're about to go into the next year with June 30 to 2017 coming up. Okay, Leslie's going to actually start our presentation today. So I think it's this.
Oh, perfect. Okay, so I'm going to go over quickly what we will cover. So we're going to talk about the natures of the services provided by Moss Adams and our auditor responsibilities, the county and management's responsibilities, the audit opinion and reports that we have issued, some best practices, observations, and recommendations that we noted during the audit. We're going to talk about 7 new accounting and auditing standards, 3 of which were effective for the 2016 fiscal year and 4 that have been released but haven't yet been effective. And then some trends for Curry County over the last 5 years, and then Curry County compared to some similar counties. All right, so the nature of services provided and our responsibility as auditors. So Moss Adams was engaged to audit the county's financial statements in accordance with GAS and GAGAS. GAS, or Generally Accepted Auditing Standards, provide a measure of audit quality and the objectives to be achieved in an audit, and GAGAS, or General Accepted Government Auditing Standards, are used by auditors of government entities and entities that receive government awards. GAGAS pertains to auditors' professional qualifications, the quality of their work, the performance of field work, and meaningful reporting. So number 2 on there, we also assisted with and completed a technical review of the financial statements for compliance with GAAP. GAAP, or Generally Accepted Accounting Principles, is the applicable financial framework used to prepare the financial statements. The standards require require that we plan and perform the audit to obtain reasonable assurance about whether the financial statements are free of material misstatement. Number 3, compliance testing and reporting under Oregon minimum audit standards. So GAGAS requires related reporting on internal control in compliance with provisions of laws, regulations, contracts, and grant agreements. Also, in Oregon, we perform tests of compliance as specified in the Oregon Administrative Rules. The Oregon Secretary of State Division of Audits published the minimum standards for audits of Oregon municipal corporations. We also consider the county's internal control over financial reporting. As auditors, we consider internal control only to determine our audit procedures and not to provide any assurance. And then 4th is we complete a single audit of federal grant programs under Uniform Guidance and the Single Audit Act. In 1984, Congress passed the Single Audit Act. A single audit is required if the entity expends more than $750,000 of federal funds in a fiscal year. The Office of Management and Budget determine the policies and procedures for the single audit supplements. And then Moss Adams' responsibility is to express an opinion on compliance for each of the major programs that we choose. For 2016, we tested federal service schools and roads and the airport improvement program. All right, we also were engaged to audit the Curry County Public Transit District's financial statements, which is a component of Curry County. And then our final step is reporting of audit results and communicating internal control findings with non-compliance, which is what we're doing right now. All right, so then management's responsibilities. So management is responsible to ensure that the financial statements are in accordance with accounting principles generally accepted in the United States. And then related to internal controls, management is responsible for designing, implementing, and monitoring those internal controls. Under compliance, so you want to make sure that compliance with federal statutes, regulations, and the terms and conditions of the county's federal awards applicable to its federal programs are all in compliance. 4th is you're required to report fraud or suspicions of fraud. Then make available documents and supporting requests during our audit and then after if we have any questions. And then finally is the representation letter, which includes representations made by management during the engagement, and it's a letter issued to us. I don't know where it went. Oh, maybe it's not. There we go.
So I'm going to move on to our results, but I guess before we do, I just want to let you know if you have any questions as we're going along, feel free to chime in and ask away, or you can wait till the end, of course. But I guess as it is management's responsibility or Moss Adams' responsibilities, do you have any questions there before we move on to our audit results?
Are you going to go into then the management discussion and analysis?
We won't.
Okay, because my only comment is, this was put before a week ago to list this or put this topic on the workshop agenda here. That's the first time that after that was published, that I saw any of this information. I have certainly questions, but maybe some of them are not even appropriate during this meeting.
And actually,
Okay.
I didn't tell Louise this ahead of time, but the management discussion and analysis is actually put together by management. It is required under the governmental accounting standards. It isn't something that we can express an opinion on. And actually, in our report, while I will tie out the numbers and make sure that it's reasonable with respect to the financial statements, it's not something that the auditing standards have identified as.
And I understand, but again, I can only relate to the limited experience I've had in the past where we discussed these draft form before it was to this point. So, which was not the case here.
Okay, and that would be something that you would work with management to review.
Understood.
Yeah. Let's see. So as we go over our audit reports, Leslie mentioned a number of areas. So being Oregon government, you have to comply with a number of different types of laws and regulations with respect to your federal awards and the Oregon minimum standards, and then complying with, generally accepted accounting principles in general. So we issue a number of reports. Oops. So the financial statements is the first report in the financial or in those that you have in front of you right now. It's page 1 of is the larger bound one is the county financial statements. And so our audit report is on page 1. And with respect to the county, we were able to, after all of our testing, come to an unmodified or clean opinion on the financial statements. You will see that there is a section in there where it does have a qualified piece to it, and that's because you guys have a component unit that's in your financial statement. It's a 4-H district. It's separately disclosed as a discretely presented component unit, so it has its own financial statement within your financial statement. We weren't engaged to audit that, and they do have their own accountants, and they receive reviewed financial statements. So we've basically that's what that says. It says, except for this one piece, the 4-H district, the financial statements we were able to get to an unmodified opinion. I just wanted to kind of clarify that because you will see that paragraph in our audit report. So other than that one thing being out of your control, unless it was ever something that you did want to get audited and opined on, we were able to get a clean opinion there. So that was nice to be able to present to you today. Those are obviously a large document to put together and all the work that goes into that, and so it's nice to be able to present that. Oh, jeez. Sorry, this mouse is at the end of me. Okay, so then we have the Oregon minimum standards. So this report is on page 116. So the report over the financial statements is the first thing that that we put in that document. All of these other reports I'm going to refer to are all at the back. The very first reports, there's about 5 reports in the back. The first one is, I believe it starts on page 116. And so this is the report that we issue over the Oregon minimum standards. And we were able to find that the county was in compliance, but we did have some findings in there that we haven't documented them in this report as material non-compliance or anything, but just items that are required to be communicated to you. One of them, which is common, and I think we've had every year as being the auditors, is over expenditures. And so sorry, what was that?
I do have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So, the funds are general fund and all other funds as appropriation levels. So, I guess I don't understand how a comment can be on a fund that's within appropriation.
So are you speaking about the general fund specifically?
No, I'm speaking about all other funds because all other funds are appropriated again.
Sorry. Louise Kallstrom, County Accountant. I guess the appropriation level, I mean, if you're going to have an over expenditure in a fund, and if it's within an appropriation level,
it's not at the fund level. So you, in your budget document, what you put together is materials and service, personnel, services, and then transfers in or out, and then you could have special items or capital outlay. And so because it's in your budget document that way, that's the way that if it's over, and it's a disclosure in your financial statements and that's required by GAAP if you overexpend in one of those areas.
Is there a certain percentage at which the non-compliance is triggered, like if you're over 10% or
It's $1.
yeah.
$1?
It is.
Okay,
$1.
gotcha.
Well, I guess my question is this comment here, experienced budgetary over expenditures in various funds, were those over expenditure of a fund? Because that's what it was listed back here, Or is it over expenditures of an appropriation level like personnel services?
It's over an appropriation level. So that's actually disclosed in note 2, and you'll see how those
Okay.
are listed in there. And it'll be by fund, but then it has listed materials and service, personnel,
okay.
capital outlay.
I was taking those comments back there to be by just over expenditure of a fund.
No.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, thank you.
Because, yeah, just Commissioner Huxley, that was on page 31, because I had that as a question when I had reviewed, and I saw it was referring specifically to 4 different funds with ending negative balances on number 2.
So there's 2 things. There's over budget in a area such as personnel services. So that's the table. And then you're right, below that is if you have a deficit balance in any fund, that also requires disclosure.
Okay, which was on note 2.
It's in note
that you
2,
were
yes.
talking about
Yeah.
on page 31.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So those are items, but I mean, it did not modify our opinion. Those are just disclosures in the notes and that we call out in our report. Let's see if I can get this right this time. So for the single audit, Leslie had mentioned that we had 2 major programs required to be audited this year. So when we have the single audit, we have to identify programs as type A or type B based on their dollar threshold, and then we do a risk assessment over those to determine which of the programs we're going to audit. So in the current year, as Leslie mentioned, it was the Forest Service cluster, the roads and schools money that you get from the Department of Agriculture, and then the airport improvement program. So those were the two programs that we audited in the current year. Your total federal expenditures, if you look on your schedule of expended awards, is about just over $5 million. So if you have over $750,000, that's what throws you into that requirement to have the single audit. So for the first program, the Federal Service Schools and Roads, we were able to complete our testing and issue a clean opinion over that program. For the airport improvement program, we did find a couple instances of material noncompliance. One we identified as a significant deficiency in internal controls, and the other was a material weakness. So I'll spend a little bit more time going over that one because management responded to those findings, and there's a corrective action plan that's in these financial statements as well that you can turn to. I think it actually is the page 128 if you want to look at those. But what we found there for the non-compliance findings over airport improvement program, the first one was related to, it has a matching component to this grant. So what your grant agreement says is that you can request 90% of expenditures, and then 10% needs to come from another component. Either it can come from your general fund, or you can get another grant to support that fund. What we found during our testing, that was 100% of expenditures were being requested, and so there was 67,882. That was the 10% that should not have been requested on that grant. So that should have come from another source, and so we have that finding on that piece. The second one was on reporting, and there's reports that are required to be filed with on these grants with the federal government that issues these grants. And in this case, there should have been 2 reports. One was called SA 271 and SA 425.
I think they're SF, but yes.
Or SF,
Yes,
SF,
yeah.
yeah.
Right there.
Oh,
271
yeah.
and 425, yeah.
Are required to be filed. And we couldn't find any evidence, and it sounded like what had happened is maybe the program director of that program had left. And so I guess it's possible that those reports were filed, but we couldn't find any evidence of that. And I know Louise looked hard to see if those had been filed, but at the very least, we did not get that support. And so definitely 2 areas that need to be looked into. I know you still have airport funds out there, and so you're going to want to make sure that you get this back into compliance. And so I think that there's a corrective action plan that is working towards that, and I know we talked briefly about that before we came in here today. The other item that we found wasn't over a specific grant, but your single audit needs to be filed but within 9 months of year end, and we're in June right now, so clearly past that 9-month mark. And so we just have a finding in there that you should make sure that you file by March 31st next year. So we had that comment as well.
So ours was not filed at all?
It was
well,
just late.
Yeah.
Okay.
Later than the requirement, because we just issued the audit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's this work, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Any questions over that? I know that's,
Well, that part's easily rectified, I would think.
And with the airport improvement program, there are different, sometimes the matching is only 5%, sometimes it's 10%, so you really do have to make sure you read each agreement, because it can be different, it is not always the same percentage.
I did it again. I have one more slide on that one, and then.
There we go.
Okay. So the Yellow Book report this is the report that we do because it's in governmental auditing standards. So Leslie had mentioned that we issue a report on internal control and compliance as it relates to the financial statements as a whole. So this isn't digging into any one specific program or anything like that. This is with respect to the financial statements as a whole. And the comment that we had here actually carries over from prior years. And while we didn't find anything in the current year that was significant, nothing had changed with respect to these internal controls. And the area that we had comment on is accounts receivable, or so it's basically grant money or any sort of intergovernmental money that you're expected to receive. There isn't a accounts receivable module where it's being tracked to make sure that it's collected upon. What we found, and I mean, like I said, this wasn't related to this year, but to 2015, so it's a carryover comment, was that you had received some money from Oregon Department of Transportation to fix some roads, and it had been accumulating expenses over a couple years. And because it was a reimbursement grant, you weren't recording the receivable. You did get the money that you were supposed to. It's just the period that it got recorded in was not the right period because it wasn't being tracked in some sort of a receivable module.
So would you recommend that we have one person in charge of grants to make sure that they're carried out according to what the grant says? Because we're finding that we're having a lot of these problems.
I think, I actually think that it's, what I've seen that works well is, and actually, well, when we have some other areas where we have suggestions for improvements but aren't to this level where we document them as a finding. One of them is related to minutes and documenting minutes. So I think one good way is to have really good, robust minutes that identify when you receive a new grant and then having somebody track it. I do think it's good for a point person. So you guys have centralized accounting. And so having the person that's in charge of accounting know what's out there and what is expected to come in. So I think that's an additional layer. And then really a third layer would be making sure that you have program managers that are aware of this. And then when you do a year-end close, which you're about to go through, getting basically a memo that goes out to the departments that says, what grants did you work on during the year? Have you requested any receivables? And just doing that question. So to have it only rely on one person, I think, can somewhat be a challenge. What I see works well is when you have those three working together.
But one person kind of in charge, making sure that the other folks do what they're supposed to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I would say that maybe whoever's in charge of accounting and reporting.
County Council.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm looking at the thicker packet,
mhm.
and I'm looking on page 128 of that talks about corrective action plan. Last page.
Yeah.
And it seems to have some of the concepts you're talking about
Yeah, yes,
right there in
yep,
it.
yep, yep, yep.
Okay,
Mhm. Yeah.
good, okay.
So those are our reports that we issued and attached to your financial statements, and they get filed with the state and with the federal government. Any questions on any of those?
You mentioned minutes, and we're going to have a
My next slide has minutes
blah-hoo-hoo
on
about
it.
minutes. But would you suggest, rather than going all the way back to when we didn't have minutes, let's just start fresh, do it now, and forget the past?
So
what are they going to do to us if they can't find minutes from
right, and
20
we
years ago?
Right, and we don't have. I mean, we didn't issue the minutes as a finding. We have it as a best practice. So I would say if you're constrained on resources, you need to, as management of the county, determine whether it makes the most sense to go back and document old minutes or not. I know a lot of them are taped, so it's not like you don't have some evidence of minutes. So I think if management makes that decision, I think it's better than not doing them.
Okay.
What was that last you said? I'm sorry.
That it's better than not doing them. If management decides that going forward we're gonna start clean here and just continue to go here, rather than spend a lot of resources, which you're limited on, to go back and document all of these, when you do have some evidence with the tapes, you know. So I think.
So in other words, let's repent right now and move forward.
Now, we won't dwell on this
Okay.
because we have a separate, but there are also, in addition to Oregon revised statutes, there are conflicting Oregon revised administrative rules and archival. So, and then
Okay.
that falls under the Oregon Secretary of State. So it's not just as easy as saying,
Yeah.
well, you should do this on it.
Right.
So
Right.
that's,
Right. Yeah, you do need to make sure that you're following
Yeah.
the laws. So. Anything else on these? Okay, now finally to this slide. So these are our areas where we've identified some comments for best practices. So these aren't areas where, like I mentioned, we don't have a finding for them. They didn't modify our opinion. These aren't the things that gave us the biggest concern, but we did want to communicate just some areas for potential improvements for future years, or just best practices. The first one I have, and actually you should have a letter for this one. This letter is the management advisory comments, so it says management letter. And so these are just a few areas that we have suggestions for improvements on. I'm probably not going to spend a ton of time going over these, but if you have any questions, absolutely jump in. The first one is related to the Oregon minimum standard. So you mentioned that for minutes you may have something specific to follow there. And so there are a lot of rules under there. Of course, we don't test each and every one. I mean, your audit would never end, right?
We can't pay you, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
guaranteed employment.
If we're gonna test them all,
Yeah,
we'll
yeah.
be here a while.
If that's an area you're interested in, I'm sure we could develop some. But so we have a couple comments on items that we did notice in there, and the first one is just related to the over expenditures and then the fund deficit balances. So we just have it in here as an area to make sure that you continue to monitor, because like I said, materiality there for reporting an over expenditure is $1. So where it typically comes in is at year end when you're doing closing and you may have been within budget all year long, and then you record your year-end accruals because you operate on the cash basis all year, and then there are some, under the modified accrual method of accounting, some accruals that you have to come in at year-end, and sometimes those will be the ones that throw your expenditures out of whack. And so just something to make sure that you're monitoring and watching. The second one is a repeat comment that we've had, and actually we had some follow-up, I think, on this one this year, but I don't think there has been any changes related to reassessing the property values. I have a slide later that talks a little bit about where your permanent tax rate is, and so this talks a little bit about if there has been any growth or any increase in values in the county, the assessor doesn't appear to have the time to go out and look at all the properties. So there may be some lost revenue there. We have it here as a comment. Of course, you do have to, as management, do a cost benefit analysis. What do you think that the revenues that you could be missing out on might be? I think in prior discussions, it sounds like it might be minimal, but it's hard to tell without actually going out and doing the reassessment. So it sounded like there was some interest in maybe trying to go out and continue to do that. Did you have a question? No. Okay, sorry. The next one actually relates to a question that Louise was kind of bringing up on your legal level of control for the budget. And right now, your budget document actually has your legal level of control in two ways for the general fund. One way is by organization units, so county administration, county council, those types of departments, basically, that the general fund operates. It also has in there and then it has the department, and then it has the classifications of materials and service, personnel expenses, capital outlay. So basically you have two levels of control that you're trying to adhere to, which then of course is more complicated and can be somewhat confusing just because you do have those two, where all of the other funds operate in the object level, where you're just looking at materials and service and personnel costs.
Like, Louise Kallstrom, County Accountant. I guess I'm not sure of that statement. Of course, I've been working on that appropriation sheet, and it'll be on our agenda next week, but the county is listing the general fund by department, but appropriating at the personnel services levels. I don't think that they are appropriating by department in the general fund.
Okay.
And if I think that's true, I mean, that's my intention of the appropriation levels. But when you look at of course, I'm used to the one for the schools. It's completely different from this one. So when you look at what local budget law is saying is that the general fund must be listed by department.
And I'm not saying must be by department. You could do it, I'm suggesting either by department or by object rather than both.
And I thought that you, reading the local budget law on this, or actually looking at their form, I thought that you had to appropriate I thought I was appropriating by classification, but not by department in the general fund.
Yeah, you would have to look at what the board actually adopts, and because you can complete the form, but what you actually adopt could just be by department. So what the Board of Commissioners ends up signing could just have county council, sheriff, whatever the departments are, with a total.
Well, I thought we had to
I think
adopt by the personnel services, materials and services.
County council, you want?
Just-
Yeah.
Thanks. I don't have the statute in front of me, and I also had understood, and I've been through different local budget adoptions at different organizations and municipal organizations like counties. It was a city, but we also, my recollection of the statute, it says you have to do what they call fund accounting, which is personal services, material services, and capital accounts, those kind of funds. And I'm just not sure how you're using the phrase legal levels of control. How do you see just our adoption of the budget to establish a legal level of control? I don't know what that means in your parlance.
So basically, the legal level of control is actually what gets adopted under the board order. So, because you can have a lot more detail in your budget document.
Sure, but what do you mean? What does, when I think of legal level of control, and when I think of control, from what I understand, I'll just briefly, and I don't want to belabor this, but you adopt a budget and you make appropriations in these different fund accountings.
Right.
And then, you can't spend it unless it's appropriated.
Right.
And then we have a budget law to establish appropriations, but then we have a different spending statutes that talk about actually writing checks and having the money go somewhere. So in my mind, the controls are through, you have to appropriate it to spend it, and then you have to follow these other processes to
Right. And I
actual-
totally
right.
agree.
But I'm not
with
sure
you.
how what legal level of control means to you when you say it like that.
And so I guess what we're talking about that is how it gets reported in your financial statements. So right now you basically have two different supplemental schedules to report how the general fund spent its money. One is which is the required supplemental schedule, which is on page. And so this is maybe this will help kind of show why
Okay.
it's a little bit confusing.
Sure.
So on page. And this is what you would,
when-
you might not see in another county or another city's financial statement. So on page
Okay.
46 is your general fund. And so this is what is presented by personnel services, materials and service, capital outlay in total. But you guys have an entirely another supplemental schedule to show general fund by department, by object, which is on page, it's at the end of your financial statements. It starts on page 103. So it's just how you're doing it is okay. I'm not saying that it's wrong by any means. It's just more work because you have these additional schedules at the back that are then by department. So I'm not by any means saying, and that's why, I mean, this isn't a finding. This is just a suggestion for.
So question, if we were to switch to the way that you're suggesting, would we have a significantly lower cost of your services?
No, yeah. So, I mean, but what it is management has to put together these financial statements, and it's an additional 10 pages. So,
And so, as a county council, you mentioned you started out talking about GAGAS and gas. Is that where some of these legal levels of control concepts that you're talking about are coming from? Are those accounting specific? Because again, I'm thinking it's legal to do. I look at is what we're doing legal, and I'm saying, yeah, I think
yes,
it is.
yeah.
And so when you talk about we can change we might want to do our legal levels of control differently, I'm thinking, well, sure, there's probably several different ways you can do things legally, but just for the record, the way we are doing it is lawful. Okay,
yes,
good.
yes. I'm not definitely not saying that.
All right.
It's just you have those additional 10 pages.
Now,
and so
the other thing, does that additional 10 pages, not from a legal point of view, but from just a explanation or from a description of our operations, do those help? You know, it seems like in the one way where you just say the fund, it seems like that's very summary description.
It is.
Does those other 10 pages break that out and
It does.
describe for more detail for anyone interested in knowing where our money
Yeah.
is, what's going on? So
Yeah, it absolutely does.
there may be some benefit to doing it that way for people who want to follow where the money's going and
yeah,
things. Okay,
yeah,
thanks.
absolutely.
All
Yeah,
right.
absolutely.
So we're doing
Yeah.
extra.
Yes.
Okay, all right,
Yes.
thanks.
A+ instead of A.
Yeah.
I have a question, because I really haven't encountered this before. If I adopted the budget and the resolutions just so general fund by personnel services, materials and services, and then all other funds by personnel services, materials and services, just those two appropriation levels, would I get deficit fund comments on my audit?
Well, I guess it depends on what your ending balance is. It's totally about ending balance.
But I mean, I'm just wondering if that
So
would.
deficit fund is totally different than over expenditure. So are you talking
okay.
over expenditure?
Because I haven't, I guess I have had before, I've had special revenue funds, and within that special revenue funds, I had food service. Food service was always a deficit, but it wasn't a comment because it was part of all the other special revenue funds.
So I think you're talking about over expenditure.
No, I'm talking about a deficit balance in one of the funds.
Okay. So the ending balance is negative.
yes.
Okay.
Of one of the funds, but I really wasn't getting comments on that because all of the special revenue funds were together as one appropriation level, so it was like it was one fund.
Yes, under the accounting standards, so not budget law, under the accounting standards, all deficit budgets need to be disclosed. So
Okay.
that's
I don't know.
and so I know it's so confusing to talk about what laws are versus just what GASB is out there saying. What do you have to put into this disclosure document?
Okay.
And so it's an accounting standard that says you have to put it into the financial statements
Okay.
as a disclosure item.
I just don't remember having a disclosure of having a negative fund balance when
I
my
see it missed
food
a lot, I would say.
Food service was always
Yeah, and I would say I've seen it missed a lot, and actually it's actually become more common most recently because of the changes in PERS and how that's recorded to your financial statements. I don't remember for yours off the top of my head, but I think it's possible that one of the funds is definitely related to recording a PERS liability. So you have a large expense, you didn't cut a check for it, so it wasn't cash out the door, but you have this liability that wasn't previously recorded in the financial statements, because if you remember last year it was an asset, and so in the current year
It's a
it's a liability. And so actually last year was the first year that I saw a lot more deficit balances, because you don't know until you get your PERS report what your entire liability is going to be, and then you have to allocate that to your funds. And so I would say until recently I haven't seen it as commonly as I am
because
now.
I don't remember seeing more than one fund having a deficit in that year, but there was several listed, so, okay.
Yeah. So I can't remember specifically for those specific funds that are listed there, but I wouldn't be surprised if at least one of them is because of the PERS allocation to that fund. So.
Not to beat the extra
No, feel free.
pages, but I think it's the extra 8 or 10 pages are really a result, from my perspective, of the way we do our budget process, the way we do our worksheets, and it's an invaluable tool
Okay,
to
yeah,
get
yeah.
down to the department by department basis. And I think it's, for all purposes, it's almost created by virtue of the way we do the budget process, and those worksheets plus the
Yeah.
monthly revenue and expense reports that track the same exact way that we do with our budget. So
Yeah.
I think it's a valuable.
Yeah, and that's absolutely,
valuable,
like I said,
you
not
know,
wrong. And if that's something
pages
that
by-
you feel is
yeah.
valuable and valuable to the
Yeah,
county and the
yeah,
people who look
so-
at the financial statements, then I would say take our comment and cross it off.
And then we request a credit for your time.
We'll note it. We'll note the comment.
Well, we're fixed fee, so any time that I go over is on me. So, you mentioned today that we're on our time, but I can tell you we've already exceeded that time, and we definitely spend more than we charge.
Oh, good. That makes me feel better.
I have some more.
Yes,
I have some more
yes.
questions
Don't
in.
worry.
I have some more questions in.
Remember
Yes,
Pinocchio.
absolutely. You have a
Oh.
captive audit, so. But no, that's the beauty of fixed
Okay.
fee for you. Okay, so I guess I have a few more. So, let's see. Just a couple, I might just hit on a couple that I thought were a little bit more significant here. Maybe go to the capital assets one, the construction and process capitalization. So in the current year, there was, maybe 4 or 5 projects transferred out of your construction and progress account into your fixed assets schedule. So where you're going to record accumulated depreciation. And that adjustment was made to the financial statements. However, by the end of our audit, it hadn't yet been added as assets within your depreciation software. So the reason I put that on here is I know Louise is leaving, and I just don't want it to fall off the radar for next year, because while this year that would have been very insignificant in what depreciation expense would be, it'll quickly add up, and next year will be a full year of depreciation. And so that is why that one is on here.
Yeah, and I have been researching that and talking, because actually what I did was the construction in progress very late in the audit and the capital assets very early. So it wasn't realized until we were basically at the end that what went out of construction in progress did not actually hit capital assets in our asset program. And so I've been talking to my assistants about it and trying to come up with a way to make sure that those two are matched early on in the closing process so that it all gets recorded.
Yes, so that's important.
And even though Louise is leaving, we are trying to work on some kind of an agreement with her, and it may include
Bribe.
It may
Year in
include
closing.
some. It may include some tasks that reflect very similar to the items, the what's called the corrective action plan. So
Correct.
So we appreciate that, and we don't intend to let this just fall off the map. We intend to follow up with it, and we're working on it.
And I think, I mean, even rolling forward capital assets next year, it'll become very clear that would need to get added. But I just wanted to highlight it just so that it's definitely somewhere so it doesn't get forgotten. Let's see.
There's a little table on the side that pulls
There's
out.
a little thing, it just fell slightly.
Oh.
Oh,
There we
then
go.
we wouldn't even lose it. Perfect.
Let's see, and then we,
Ooh, a high-tech podium.
I guess I just want to go to the last one that I think is a couple here. Oops. Oh, we went a few. There we go. So the last one that I kind of wanted to highlight here is this last one on the page, which is deferral of the procurement policy. So a few years ago, the guidance surrounding federal awards changed, and it used to be what we called a 133 audit or single audit. It's still a single audit, but now the new guidance is called uniform guidance. And so that's what raised the threshold for where you would test a major program of your federal awards. And what it also did is it changed the compliance requirements when we perform our testing, or that management has to monitor with respect to those awards. And one of the ones that has had a deferral period is the procurement policy. So there's actually a lot of example policies out there for this, but it actually has some very specific requirements on procurement with respect to federal awards. It needs to be a written policy, and it was until about a month ago it was required to be implemented July 1st, 2017. They just issued one more deferral. So you have now until July 1st, 2018 to have this in place. So the policy needs to be in place by then. It needs to be implemented starting that day. So any of your federal awards, anybody who's a program manager, anybody who's responsible for overseeing those needs to know what that is, because you probably have your procurement policy that you follow right now, and it's in compliance for Oregon and for the county needs. But anything that has that federal taint to it needs to follow these new standards. And so
I like your choice of words, taint.
So I put that one on there. It was nice that 1 year deferral came out. And then as far as you should document, so this might be something that you get documented, is that you are following the old standards, because it should be written, so we have that comment in here as well, is that you should document, okay, we're following our old standards, we're deferring to July 1st, 2018, and just so that you have that support if anybody ever came in, that you had that support to say, yes, we are following our old ones, we will implement when we're supposed to on July 1st.
Thank you.
I have some examples if you want.
I know, and I think we sent them to you, but if not, let us know.
Okay.
So that was best practices. I know we had a lot of good discussion over that, and like I said, these are just best practices or recommendations. These weren't anything that I was implying that you were doing wrong. Just some comments for potential changes. But it sounds, anything else there? I didn't hit on everything in here just because I didn't know how much time you want us to spend.
As long as you're not on the clock, we're okay.
I can touch on one other one then, if is the road fund reserves. And this is just, I know you have the ability to move some of the road fund money to support some of the sheriff services. And so it didn't actually look like for 2016 that money was moved for that.
There wasn't.
But is it planned for?
Next year, no.
Okay.
It's happening this year, but none for next year.
Okay, so I think we just put a comment in here just as a reminder that obviously if you do, you have the ability to do that, and if you do use that money, to definitely consider, you know, the future of roads. And right now it does, at least as last we checked, there wasn't a plan that basically penciled out the road department and what might come due for infrastructure over the next, 10 years, and just making sure that you do have the resources available to meet those needs, because it is important, and you want to make sure. But it sounds like you might be managing that, because like I said, in these financial statements I didn't see any transferred. I know the year before there was, and then obviously we haven't got to 2017 yet, so. But just kind of a high level, just suggestion for the road department to put out a improvement plan.
So just so you know, we did, during the budget process, talk a lot about 5-year plans. 5-year plans on the road department, 5-year plans on vehicles, 5-year plans on maintenance, 5-year plans on IT maintenance. So we did go through some 5-year planning in our budget process this
good.
year.
Good to hear. Any questions on any of those?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I just put a couple together, 2 slides. We actually have a whole different presentation that we could do. I just put together 2 high-level ones just to kind of show some trends in the county. Actually, I only have 2 slides, but we do actually have a full presentation that we can do that has all the different funds, your full accrual, what that looks like, and just some unique, graphs to look at. But I put together just a couple for you. Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
I just wonder if that was in our information here.
This is not.
Oh, but
Yeah.
now that file is on that. Now, is that something we may have a copy of or keep a copy of?
Of
that
this?
file, which,
Yeah, you can have.
okay,
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
and would show these. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you.
I actually have one, I think that we did for you last year, it was 3 years. It was 2005, 2010, 2015. I didn't, since that was a separate one, I didn't do that for this because I figured this was already going to be relatively lengthy. But I do have that if you want that as well. I think there was quite a few more graphs, and it doesn't capture 2016, but it does have an interesting.
For our records
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
I would say
yeah, you can
definitely.
absolutely keep a copy of
Definitely.
this presentation,
Okay.
and then I can absolutely send you that other
Okay,
one.
super. Thank you.
So this is your general fund, because obviously this is the fund that's can be the most constrained. And while the county has faced some challenges, what I thought was unique about this slide is really showing that over the last 5 years, you really have been able to curb your expenses and keep those relatively flat. So that means you're probably being able to maintain service at the same levels. However, the revenue line, what's a little bit, I would say, deceiving about this is this includes transfers in. So in 2015, while it looks like you had an up year in revenue, that is the year that included the transfer in from the road department. Without the road department transfer, it was actually $6 million. And the current year was a very small transfer in. So if you didn't have transfers in there, you would see a dip down and maybe a little dip back up. And then this green bar, the last bar, is actually your fund balance. And so this is kind of showing that you had a little bit of a dip this last year, but holding that fund balance while you're looking for other ways to either maintain expenses or bring in some additional revenue streams in order to support service in the general fund. But not having to go to the road fund in 2016 is really the result is that dip in fund balance, but it's good to be able to maintain that fund and not have to go there. And then the other slide I just wanted to put up there is just kind of Curry, in relation to, I put together just 3 county average, just to look at basically what your property tax, your direct rate is. And I compared to Klamath, Tillamook, and Yam Hill, and just looking at that, obviously you have some constraints there, and so, you know, whether you go out and reassess values or, you know, maintain service with what you're operating at. I just kind of wanted to show this slide too, just because I think that it kind of speaks to where the county is sitting in that area.
And that's just counties, we're not talking all the other special districts
No,
and
this,
stuff.
yeah, so this
Okay.
is your direct rate. So hopefully that ties to your direct rate.
It does.
And like I said, we actually have a whole presentation of a bunch of different slides. I just pulled out a couple that I thought might be of interest. And then we're just going to close with some of the new accounting standards that are out there and what was implemented in the current year. The current year ones, I would say out of these, the only one that you probably noticed any difference in your financial statements is this first one on the fair value measurements application. So what that new standard did, so it's a new disclosure in your financial statements that basically tells how any sort of investments that are at fair value, how you calculate fair value or how it's calculated, and then what type of level it is. And so there's 3 different levels. They're disclosed in your notes. The level 1 investment would be anything that's a stock. So you could go out and see it's publicly traded. And then a level 2 could be traded, but maybe not as often. And then a level 3 would be something that you had to put something together for as like a cash flow projection and market to fair value. So that's just a new requirement that all governments had to implement in this last year. A little bit of a snoozer. But just it's in the for-profit world, they've been having this disclosure for a very long time, and so it just kind of brought it into the governmental world. And they actually, I think that they did a little bit better of a job. It's not quite as complex as the one that they did for the for-profit world. And then, so that was in the current year, so that was something new. What you have going for next year is a couple new ones. This first one, GASB 74, this is related to other post-employment benefit plans. So this is actually a plan. So if you had a trust or something for, say if you have health insurance that you're going to pay for your employees after they were to leave, that would be considered an other post-employment benefit plan. If you had one of those and you were maintaining assets for it, you'd have to follow the standard. But typically this would be like a third party. So they would implement it. And then and what happens is then in the next year, you would have to follow the same, you would have to record that liability based on the plan. So very similar to when you adopted the new GASB 68 standard for PERS, when that liability hit your balance sheet. The first year, I'm just going to kind of do a correlation here. PERS, Oregon PERS had to implement GASB 67 so that they would provide you all the schedules that you needed to put the liability or assets on your books in the next year. So this is the same thing except for other post-employment benefit plans. So very similar. If you have one, which I can't remember off the top of my head, if you do.
I can't think of one.
Okay. No. Okay. So these will be not applicable to you if you don't have those. I couldn't remember off the top of my head. But if you do, and then it would be effective for the financial statement reporting in 2018. So you got a year on that one. So if anything comes up, any new ones. And then the one that will affect you, and actually the department that's going to affect the most is actually the assessor's office, is GASB 77. And so I don't know if your assessor specifically has been keeping up on this or not. The Oregon Assessors Association has been very active in determining what is scoped in and what is scoped out for this. So what this new standard is for tax abatements. So when you've entered into agreements to abate taxes so that there will be some sort of maybe economic development or something along those lines. Until now, there was no accounting guidance on if you had to do anything with that, if you did, what it was, or there was nothing out there. When this standard came out, it says that you're going to have to disclose this information. So you're not going to record it on your balance sheet or anything of that nature, but you do have to have a disclosure on it. And so why it's important is actually the cities and other districts are all going to be looking to you to find out their numbers. And so it's important to know that. So you already have the information because it was, what it's related to is the November 2017 tax roll. So that information is out there. And then looking at any of the abatement programs that apply to you. So I actually have a list, so I could always provide that to your assessor. But I just don't know if he's as actively involved with the Assessors Association, because they came together and looked at a number of the Oregon abatement programs to see what was scoped into this and what was scoped out. And so what you'll do is you'll disclose all of those in your notes, the name of the program and then how much revenue was abated, I guess, for this amount. There are some examples out there. So I know Multnomah County, Deschutes, and I think Clackamas all have published what they're going to provide, and so it's on their website. So there's some examples out there, and then I actually have a list of other counties that use the same property tax program that you use. So if they've already done some of the legwork, you might be able to utilize that as well. So that's something to know, be aware of. The assessor hopefully is aware of this. And because people will probably be coming to him in the next couple months, so.
We'll give him a tough quiz.
You
Yeah.
mentioned economic development. Is this the type of program, I think I've seen the statutes where sometimes if there is a survivor of a deceased military or law enforcement, they can get a deferral or something on their property taxes. Is that the type of program about it, or is you really talking about economic development? Like,
I think it's economic development. So I actually have a list of them all, and I
Okay.
think that one's on there, and I just can't remember off the top of my head.
Okay,
I'm never
fair
gonna.
enough.
I
Sure.
don't think at this
No,
point
I know.
I'm going to memorize these,
No,
but
I agree with
I can't
that.
because I think it is there. I think there was about 30 on
Yeah.
this list, and maybe half of them
Okay.
qualified because there has to be an agreement, and
Oh,
I think that it has to
okay.
be. Yeah, I think it has to be for economic development.
Okay.
So there are some requirements. The Assessors Association went through all of the ones under the Oregon statutes and put together whether they thought that they complied or not with for the accounting piece of it anyway. And then actually put their reasons why. And so,
Thank you.
yeah. So there's a lot of information out there. So
Okay.
you should have some support when you go down that road. And obviously, we can always provide you with the information I mentioned as well. So. And then the last one, they're just changing some of the requirements for component units. So you have 2 component units. You have the 4-H district, and then you have the public transit district. Right now, they're both discretely presented on your financial statements. So if you look at page, just as an example, you look at page 12, you see that they have their own columns. This is considered discretely presented. If it was a blended component unit, you actually wouldn't see it in here. It would be within your governmental funds or your proprietary funds, and you wouldn't see them broken out separately. There's going to be some rules, so you have to actually go through a process of determining whether it's discretely presented or blended. And so when that becomes effective, it's going to change some of those requirements, so you'll have to take another look at these 2 to see if they should be blended or continue to be discretely presented as they are here. So.
And you have some standards to determine that?
Yeah. So it's under GASB 80, and I think that there might be a flow chart in there that helps.
And as you do the audit for 6/30/2017, that will be enforced, or is it when you do the audit for 6?
So it's effective for June 30, 2017. So when the next financial statements are drafted, you'll need to
So we
go
need
through
to
that.
look at those before we get to somewhere around September, October, because hopefully the audit will be done at a much
Yes.
faster pace this year.
Yeah.
Were we
Just-
way behind this year or something? or-
We are extremely behind. We should be doing this right here back in January.
Oh, we missed.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, the financial statements are due to the state
By
by
December
December 31st. But
Oh,
you
And
were
then I
challenged
usually
for a
ha-
period of
and then
time
I
with
usually
no,
have
with no
a-
county accountant
Yeah.
there to.
And I usually have the presentation sometime in
Yeah.
January to the board after it goes to the state and we have final statements.
Yeah.
So yes, very late.
Are we better situated this year to comply?
Well, I certainly hope so. Once again, you're going to be changing county accountants. But I've got a file of closing comments of things that I know need to be done. And depending on when you get the new person on board, I will be starting the audit year-end closing process. So.
Thank you, thank you.
Yeah, because I think there was definitely a few months with nobody in your position, and then
From March until August.
yeah, so that
So it was quite hard.
not a good transition, huh?
No.
And with that, any other final closing comments, questions?
Nope.
Thank you, both of you, very much.
Thank you.
For the presentation.
Yeah, yes, absolutely.
Before I have a question outside the meeting before you guys leave, so
Okay,
just
yeah,
we'll only take a
absolutely.
minute to ask you.
Okay,
Well,
perfect.
do you want to then take a recess? We didn't really have a recess before the last meeting and our next subject.
We had a 2-minute.
Certainly.
Sorry, we kind of barged
No,
in.
no,
No.
we were late for you, but.
Oh, we thought you were on the clock.
No, we're here all day. No kidding.
Commissioner Boyce, you had a comment?
Well, I'm just up
question?
against a time constraint today. I have till 12:30. I'm not sure
Okay.
where how we're scheduled.
I don't
The
think
next
that
topic
that's-
is, we're going to have a minutes
Yeah.
discussion, and
It'll be in
the
minutes?
Box staff will
Yeah.
be looking for direction from the board. We're going to kind of summarize where we are at to date with the minutes that John Jesuit's been working on since being here, get direction from the board for essentially presenting the minutes to the board for approval, which is, there's the preparation and then there's the approval, and so we're at the point where anyway, so I think we can have that wrapped up in short order.
I would say so too. So why don't we, before 12:30?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr.
Why don't
Chair.
we take, let's call it, can we take a 10-minute break?
Till
We'll
about
come back
11:30?
11:30,
Yes.
please?
Okay, thank you very
Thank
much.
you. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
What draws you to the Oregon coast? Is it the green and blue surf on a brilliant sunny day, or angry, boiling waves during a raging winter storm? Do you prefer quiet coves or powerful breakers churning the sand? How about sand castles? Do you come for the rising tide or the setting sun, to marvel at whales gliding through the sea or flying in the sky? Reasons to travel the Pacific Coast Scenic Byway are as far-reaching as your imagination. This is a spectacular part of Oregon that traces the entire coastline along Highway 101, guiding you to the sea and away again, to coastal towns big and small, lowland marshes, and breathtaking overlooks. It's a long byway stretching from the mouth of the Columbia River to the California border, 363 miles in all, of some of the most unblemished, awe-inspiring seascapes you'll find anywhere. In addition to its designation as a scenic byway, Highway 101 in Oregon also has been selected as an all-American road. That means when you come here, you will experience one of only 31 roads considered to be the best of the best in America.
You know, when people come to the Oregon coast, they're really astonished how beautiful it is. And what separates it from many of the other places in North America that are coastal is how undeveloped it is. And that's because Oregon had a very far-sighted land use program back in the 1970s. We have all these wonderful state parks along the scenic byway that are perfect places to stop and enjoy nature in a relatively unspoiled way.
From the north, you begin in Astoria, the first permanent European settlement in the Pacific Northwest. It's a genuine maritime community with ship traffic from around the world seeking harbor up the Columbia. The official State Maritime Museum of Oregon sits here on the river. Beautiful Victorian houses dot the hillside. And standing 600 feet above sea level is the 125-foot Astoria Column. It features a hand-painted spiral frieze that would stretch over 500 feet if unwound. Heading south, you'll find the community of Seaside, a popular vacation spot that offers miles of public beaches, an oceanfront promenade, and a downtown core packed with restaurants, shops, and even a beach-type arcade. Cannon Beach is home to one of Oregon's most photographed natural wonders, Haystack Rock. Get your shots from the beach, or take a short drive up to Ecola State Park and look down on this 235-foot work of art. The picturesque small town is filled with art galleries, shops, and cafes. Ready for more? 10 miles to the south, this is the view from Cape Falcon. You're 700 feet above the Pacific. Here, the Pacific Coast Byway has been carved out of Neahkahnie Mountain and held in place by stone walls built in the 1930s by craftsmen in the Civilian Conservation Corps. Upon descending the mountain, the highway drifts inward around Tillamook Bay to Tillamook, the unofficial dairy capital of Oregon. The verdant valley of dairy farms in this area produces 25 million gallons of milk annually. Much of that is processed into natural cheddar cheese. And near more than 800 miles of navigable waters, Tillamook is a crossroads for North Coast recreation. From here, you owe it to yourself to veer off Highway 101 to explore the Three Capes Scenic Loop. This drive places you right at the beach, beginning with Cape Mears, home to the shortest lighthouse in Oregon. 9 lighthouses stand sentinel along Oregon's coastline. They're monuments to our maritime heritage, towering links to the past, and as much a part of the rugged Oregon coastal landscape as any offshore monolith. The Cape Mears Lighthouse was first illuminated in 1890. Oregon's oldest lighthouse is at Cape Blanco, the westernmost point in the state. It was commissioned in 1870 to aid shipping generated by gold mining and the lumber industry. The 93-foot-high Yaquina Head Lighthouse is the tallest in Oregon. Today, its automated light continues to aid navigation at the entrance to Yaquina Bay. Many of the lighthouses are open to the public. Most happen to be excellent places to view nesting seabirds and offshore sea life. Tide pools, those rocky areas between high and low tides, support unique and diverse plants and animals. Vast amounts of colorful, otherworldly creatures wait to be discovered. But walk cautiously. These organisms are tough enough to withstand the pounding surf, but are utterly vulnerable to human activity. Wildlife and sea life abound on the coast.
There are 6 national wildlife refuges along the Oregon coast. The Pacific Coast Scenic Byway bisects these refuges or goes alongside them. It provides you the opportunity to see a wide variety of abundant wildlife, including seabirds, seals and sea lions, deer and elk, and many other wildlife.
Cape Kiwanda lies at the southern end of the Three Capes Scenic Loop, near the town of Pacific City. Here you'll find a second Haystack Rock on the byway. Hike up the dune to marvel at stunning views of sandstone formations as they turn yellow, gold, or even red in the changing sunlight. If your timing is right, you'll spot 1 or 2 of the dory fleet sprint onto the beach after a day of fishing. How's this for a dinner setting? Restaurants along the Pacific Coast Scenic Byway accommodate just about any taste. Many serve an ocean view with every meal. Up and down the coast, you'll find seafood, of course, but don't limit yourself just because you're by the water. The Central Coast begins around Lincoln City, which is one of the larger communities on the byway. It has a reputation for being windy and was recognized by Kite Lines magazine as the best place to fly a kite in North America. It was incorporated from several small towns and as a result offers a sandy beach that is 7.5 miles long. A number of small state parks lie nestled along the ocean between Lincoln City and Newport. Stop, get out of your car, and take in the commanding views that are there, right next to your all-American road. Depot Bay boasts the world's smallest navigable harbor, 6 square acres in all. A seawall runs the length of the downtown, so everywhere you go, you're rewarded with a dramatic view of the Pacific. It's considered Oregon's whale-watching capital, with thousands making their way past Oregon each fall and spring. Fishing and whale-watching excursions regularly set sail from this little harbor. Leaving Depot Bay, you'll soon find yourself at Cape Foulweather, a basalt outcropping that looms 500 feet above the water. It was here, in 1778, British Captain James Cook first sighted the mainland of North America on the Pacific coast. A fierce storm that almost put an end to his expedition earned this rugged stretch of coastline its name. Coastal weather can change by the hour. You will find a lot of wet days, but rain can become blue sky with white clouds in an afternoon. Mist kissing the headlands burns away, or storms can last for days. Some people come for those storms. Whether you find sunbursts of happiness or cloud cover like a quilt, there's always a reason to come back. Like Lincoln City, Newport is one of the larger towns on the byway. The historic bayfront on the north side of Yaquina Bay hosts one of Oregon's largest commercial fishing fleets. It has a busy, genuine working waterfront feel, with fish plants and boats coming and going from as far away as Alaska. On the south side of the bay is the Oregon Coast Aquarium. Share waters beneath the ocean with sharks and rays. And don't miss the sea otters at mealtime.
Now, all 4 of our otters were rescued otters. They were found out in the wild.
For the next 50 miles, your trip along Highway 101 hugs the coast. Many more state parks offer opportunities to stop and take in outstanding vistas, crashing waves, and offshore rock formations. 2 small towns of note are Waldport and Yachats. Waldport sits on Alsea Bay, where fishing, clamming, and crabbing are popular. The 40-mile stretch south of Waldport marks steep headlands, jagged volcanic outcrops, and jaw-dropping scenery, the rugged edge of the Oregon coast. Yachats is a quiet, unhurried artist town just a couple of miles north of Cape Perpetua. Drive to the top of this bluff, and you'll be 800 feet above the water. On a clear day, you can see 70 miles of Oregon coastline. Drive past Heceta Head Lighthouse to the Sea Lion Caves. A quick elevator ride 200 feet down puts you in America's largest sea cave, the year-round home of wild stellar sea lions. Rugged cliffs give way to graceful beaches as you approach Florence. In the spring, be on the lookout for wild rhododendrons along the roadsides. Similar to Newport, you'll find an historic Old Town commercial district along the Siuslaw River. Florence is the gateway to the Oregon Dunes National Recreation Area, a 47-mile sandbox of wind-sculpted sand dunes towering 500 feet above sea level. These are the largest expanse of coastal sand dunes in North America. Reedsport is at the center of the Oregon Dunes, but you can do more than ride a dune buggy or motorcycle. A short 3 miles east of town on Highway 38, more than 100 Roosevelt elk reside at the Dean Creek Elk Viewing Area. Early mornings or just before dusk are the best times to photograph the herd. Paying homage to Oregon's timber heritage, Reedsport hosts an annual Chainsaw Sculpting Championship, a time to watch 3-dimensional artwork come to life right before your eyes. Mountains of sand continue at Winchester Bay. You'll also find an active marina here. It's a great place to try your hand at crabbing or take a charter for salmon or bottom fishing. The dunes end and you enter the coast's largest urban area at Coos Bay. It has the deepest natural harbor between Seattle and San Francisco. Foreign vessels sail under the massive McCullough Bridge. You may have noticed, dotted along the Pacific Coast Scenic Byway are many beautiful and iconic bridges. The Megler Bridge in Astoria, Yaquina Bay Bridge in Newport, Alsea Bay Bridge in Waldport, Siuslaw River Bridge in Florence, and the magnificent McCullough Bridge in Coos Bay are works of art in their own right. Charleston is slightly off the byway at the mouth of the bay. It was once an old waterfront fishing village and has become a commercial.
We're back on on the record here, so.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks again.
This one has low battery.
It's 11:31. We're back after 10-minute recess. It's, again, continuing with the workshop of Wednesday, June 14th. Again, 11:31. This is the second portion of the workshop, and it is on meeting minutes. And I'll open this to County Council.
Thank you, and I appreciate you opening it to County Council, serving in my capacity as the BOC Admin Supervisor for John Jesuit. Minutes, as you saw from the audit presentation and probably from your historical knowledge, have been just a point that needs work. And so it's a task I've been told John was a priority for him, and he's been working on them, and he has several minutes accumulated from different meetings, and he's provided a couple of sample minutes for your review. And the bottom line on the minutes is how much narrative and content do we want? Minutes are perhaps an art versus a science. There's certain minimum requirements that are legal standards for minutes as described in the Attorney General's manual. But that being said, the minutes are a record of the county's transactions of business, but it's a matter of resources, as the auditors explained as well. John Jesuit is our only resource on this, and the more detailed the minutes are, the longer it takes, and the less other items he can get to. And then at the end, I just want you to consider Commissioner Gold had a person contact her about volunteering in the BOC office on our policies, and what I had exchanged messages with that person. I think their name is Scrivener, if I'm not mistaken. And as John and I were preparing for this, I actually thought, boy, if we could get a volunteer who could go on our website, look at our meetings, and start preparing minutes for the board to do, that would be something. But for the time being, John Jesuit will be doing them, preparing them for the board review and approval. And I just would like John then, if he's got time, to describe for the board the 2 minutes that are in front of them. It looks like you have a workshop minute and a board meeting minute. They're in different formats, and maybe you could just talk about the reason for that as well, because I don't know that it's a legal requirement. You're going to be hot mic'd, so you can, unless there were questions to start with. But John, why don't you describe the...
Can I just ask one question?
Yes.
Are both of these forms legal?
I'm going to say yes, and so the minutes are just to reflect the action. Now on meeting and so the public record law requires notice, public attendance, and minutes be taken of meetings. Minutes under the Attorney General's rule, and I'm talking off the top of my head from memory of looking at it in the past, but it says that you need to talk about attendance and then principal subjects described. But for instance, in members present, and then motions, results of votes, substance of discussion on any matter, and then reference to document discussed at a meeting. But see, for workshops, yes, there could be references to documents in discussion, but of course we don't do votes or roll calls per se at workshops. So I think it's good to have workshop minutes in a different format so that when you look at them instantly, you know, okay, this is a workshop. The others are commissioner minutes, so that they don't get mistaken. But John, I'll let you talk about it unless there are other questions right now about things.
Thank you, County Council Huddle. Per County Council Huddle's direction, I looked up the Attorney General for Oregon Public Records and Meetings Manual, and there's a section on minutes, and I summarized what is absolutely necessary in minutes, and that is what type of meeting and where is the meeting at, a date and start and adjourn time, who's attending, agenda items, testimony and discussion of each agenda item, and then a motion on each agenda item, and at the very end, go to executive session. So those are the things that have to be included in the minutes per the Attorney General of Oregon. This form right here, this is the one that was used by the Citizens Budget Advisory Committee. They, I got this from Ken Duquesne, and in fact, the template I got from Ken Duquesne, and I modified it for the workshop. And it's not a time sensitive is the wrong phrase. But for example, many times a commissioner will say something at the meeting starts at 10. The commissioner will address a topic at 10:45 and then address the same topic at 11:15. And that's not reflected in here. So some of the comments that County Halster made here at this page 1 could have been made 30 minutes apart.
So question, does it really matter whether the time's there or not if we have the essence of the meeting? In my opinion, no. But
And I concur. This is more of a time-sensitive document. Or in other words, these points are pretty much
as the agenda went.
Yeah, there might be a discrepancy 4 or 5 minutes, but it's not going to be 30, 45-minute discrepancy.
Mm-hmm.
So, right, when you say time sensitive, you mean the minutes of on the Board of Commissioners meetings are more or less chronological, whereas...
Yes, well, because I do a stream of consciousness just typing here.
Mhm.
Typically, I've analyzed the 17 meetings I've taken minutes for, and I type out about 1,000 words an hour. For example, today was 992 at the 1 hour mark. So to organize those takes a while. Also it depends. Both of these things take formatting, and that's what takes the time.
Mhm.
Because pretty much I cut and paste what I type, correct the spelling errors, correct the abbreviations, and then format it so it looks good.
So how much time are you spending on minutes? Just basically.
Oh boy.
Per hour of meeting, how's that?
Per hour, I mean, I have not kept track of that. I would say this one took me about 9 hours to do.
And that's April 5th meeting.
Right.
How long did that meeting last?
From 10 until 3:30 approximately, and that's addressed on the, so that was
Thank you. And there's
a long meeting.
18 pages of minutes out of essentially 5.5 hours, and it took another 7 hours to make the minutes. That does seem that it's the formatting. So
Almost a burden.
well, it's partly an explanation. I don't know if it's an explanation, but it's resource intensive, time intensive, and we have limited resources. And so, and then what might make sense is if we went through one of these and the board could say it's important to have this included or not, so that for future we can figure out what to leave in or out, and that's something. So go ahead, Mr. Chair.
Just a question on the time again, because we said, or your response on the April 5th, which started at 10 and ended at, what did we say, 3:30?
Yes.
Approximately, how long did that take you? And I say approximately.
About 9 hours to put this format.
Okay,
I
so
have
that's...
my format here.
That was from taking your original notes during the meeting, and after that, it took you 9 hours
Yes.
to format it. And what was what you felt was the most time-consuming part was
Well, it
the
was
formatting, or?
formatting and putting everything in order so it looks good.
Okay, so the next question, and we'll come back because the county council made certainly some comments on this. On the workshop, which was started at 1 and ended at 2:30, so that was an hour and a half versus almost 4 times that long, 3 times anyway. Approximately how long did that take? Although it was a workshop, so it's completely different as far as probably the dialogue that was going on.
Again, I didn't keep.
And I say approximate.
I would say 3 to 4 hours.
Okay, okay. So, I'm going to go back to what county council suggested, okay? Because I think we're dealing with two different beasts here, you know, not only two different formats, but we're dealing with completely two different types of meetings.
Of records.
Right. Not that I think the minutes and records keeping, not to get bogged down in a technicality, it doesn't basically identify, it's saying a public meeting. Well, a workshop is a public meeting, a Board of Commissioners office is a public meeting. We could go on and on. So not to get bogged down there, but I think that certainly this raised, the workshop raised some questions, not even so much for the sequence of time, but we basically had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 people some point spoke, okay? And then, of course, I didn't completely follow the action required because it was that the action that was required according to the accountant? Were the two tied together? I just wasn't sure, you know, as those comments, or is that?
This action is what county council provided.
Or what they're,
What Chairman Huxley.
or it almost looked like that was an opinion, you know, there's not, I just didn't, simply moving surplus, but.
Sure, I think using the phrase action
Okay.
required, this is a workshop, so you don't really have any action required. I
Yeah.
think,
Just so we would look and see, okay, was it just comments from the same person or what?
yeah.
And then if we went that way, to also have the heading on each page, because I found myself, you know, following through and saying, well, wait a minute, what was that again? Oh, action, you know. And
Sure.
so I had some difficulty following that. That took, although even in this format, and again, because John wasn't tracking these, you know, he didn't start with the purpose of let me track so I can see how long it will take. So these are approximate times. But it seems that the approximate time per hour of meeting was about the same, and that may change, you know, now that you're tracking probably closer for the future. So was it not? But
It still almost seems
okay.
an hour
Okay.
for hour,
yeah,
almost.
Almost the same. I would suggest, and going back to county council's comment, you know, that we look closer. You know, I looked at these, but I didn't. You know, I spent an hour or so maybe. But that we look closer and then come back and say my preference was the first one, especially if
When you say the first one,
the
you
first
mean the
19
county board of commissioners
but go
meeting.
through and perhaps we can half that, you know, if we say knock it down and get it to something.
Sure.
But that's,
You know,
again, it's a 6 or 7 hours meeting too.
I'm looking at all this, and do we need all this back and forth
Okay.
comments between people? I'm
That-
saying no, we just need the basic motions.
What I've seen
That's
is
what I'm
some
thinking.
of them will, instead of saying, you know, if you look on the third page 3, for instance, you've got.
That's the 3 of 19?
Yes, you know, looking
Yeah.
near the top, county council huddle reviewed rules, and then you've got the hollow bullet points of what I said.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes I might have seen minutes that
Yeah.
say county huddle reviewed rules, Commissioner Boyce opposed rules. These minutes give the reasons, which again are good historical records, and then Commissioner Gold, and then you know, sometimes you could have spoken opposition or something, and
Exactly.
they can be more summary
And then-
versus having the back and forth. But that's a board, it's
But
an
that
art,
was
not a
going
science.
through,
Yep.
with you suggesting to
Yeah.
go through this, But I think this format, given that it was about equal on time per hour, was I liked a lot better than
Okay.
the 3 pages.
I see. Well, just this format. In other words, if we put both the workshop minutes and general meeting minutes in the same format, you won't have to box motions or any of that kind of stuff.
As long as it still made
In
sense.
this format.
Okay.
No, I think what I'm hearing the chair say is that he doesn't think we need to necessarily follow this format, but to put workshop minutes in the Board of Commissioner,
Okay.
just
All right.
have one form of minutes.
But if he had come back and said it took me
Oh, right. There's a
1/4
significantly
of the
savings.
time,
Sure.
but that's not the
Right.
case. So
Okay.
because of that, I'm saying this, but then to follow your sort of lead there as far as then go through and reduce it down with the logic
Well,
and the examples that you gave.
Here's what I'm willing to do. If the board wants to kind of take this under consideration themselves, and if we could have a very brief, the reason we have a workshop is to talk about this without taking up a bunch of time at an action meeting. And what I was hoping to do is get something to the board so during an action meeting, we could then get direction and something very short where the board could say, do the minutes, take out some of the back and forth, summarize the conversation. We have a good video system for documenting if anybody really wants to know exactly what was said. But I did talk while Commissioner Boyce had his hand up. I just wanted to see if he had anything else to say. So,
Commissioner Boyce?
Go ahead, Commissioner Gold. I can wait.
Well, I was just going to say, we've got these videos. If someone wants to go look at the detail, they can do that. But also, John keeps track of the time when someone chimes in. If he just put those little times, then someone could look back at the minutes and go to the time on the video and have at it.
That's why I keep track of the time, to find it on the video.
Right.
Commissioner Boyce?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it bears repeating. We all understand our responsibility. Minutes are absolutely one of the most important things we can do. However, in the interest of time, keeping things simple, a couple comments I'd like to make for the board's consideration. Number one, if we have him typing 1,000 words a minute, that's pretty good.
An hour.
Excuse me.
Okay.
Man, you're not paid enough.
Yeah.
Smoking.
I
Yes,
think that was like 16 words a minute.
1,000 words per hour. That really is
16.6.
that, along with the video backup, really gives us the opportunity to be pretty confident that we're not overlooking anything. As far as having a real clean version, if the public comes back or ourselves need more detail, we, again, as Commissioner Gold just said, we can go to the video. The public can go to the I'll just, for lack of a better term, the raw document that he's typed. Takes pressure off him, you, capacity to do other things. The reason I'm putting a little confidence in the original document that he's going to do is that it's pretty free from anybody regrouping and saying, no, that wasn't what I said, or that, and getting involved. I want to keep commissioners out of that, and I'm just trust whoever are, and county council. Yeah, that's all.
If you had just the basics
I
there.
think County Council was first.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Commissioner Gold.
I was just
Okay,
going to say,
Commissioner Gold.
if you just have the basics there, then there's going to be none of this, oh, I said this, she said that kind of thing.
Agreed.
If they want to go back to the video, great. But if you put the times there and they really want to go back and review the video, fine. How much time would it take you to put the times in there?
We'll cut it in half.
And what could happen, and here's what I have seen, because the process is John creates the minutes and he'll put them in a folder of draft for the commissioners to review, and once you've reviewed them, we'll bring them to a meeting to adopt. And during the review process, if there's and he'll have then the times of the video where you can go and look to see what was said. And if there's something that needs to be corrected or specifically added that you wanted to make sure was in there, you could say, please, quote me at this point, and then we'd bring that back. But that would be, I think we'd have a significant time savings, and we'd have accurate and lawful minutes and some level of efficiency. Now, that being said, is there any, and I know we're talking about, and the auditor said, start now and move forward. I have traded messages with Mrs. Scrivener on respect to the policies, and we didn't really move forward on that. But I think it just kind of dropped, not for any, there wasn't no decision, it just, other things got in the way. But if I would like to talk to her, if she's interested in really doing something, and she could do it remotely from her home, is if she's interested in starting to do minutes from past meetings as a volunteer, it might be, or just if anyone's watching, if there's any volunteers who want to draft
Well,
minutes
she's
for the county.
extremely
Yeah.
competent.
Yeah.
She was
But I
a legal
just,
secretary.
right, and so
at
I
one
just
time.
don't know if that's something she'd be interested in. I know she was interested in looking at the policies, but if she's really just a heart, a volunteer at heart, maybe she's not too picky about what we ask her to volunteer on. So I'll touch base with her again. I'll just see.
I'm going to see her at a meeting Friday.
You?
Do you want me just to
That would-
kind of...
Talk to her about this meeting and that her name came up and that see if it's anything that she might be interested in. Just-
past meetings, right?
Yeah, if possible. And heck, maybe if we do meetings going forward, John Jesuit and I could work on perhaps a procurement policy that we need to update, or some other things that are just.
I think that would be wonderful.
just
Spending the
some-
whole time on
anyway.
minutes just
Yeah.
doesn't make any
All right.
sense.
Just a few more comments and more to Commissioner Gold here. And again, I don't want to get bogged down with statutes, but I don't want to just dismiss them either. And it's, again, it doesn't differentiate between a workshop and any other meeting. A
It's
public
public
meeting
meeting.
is a public meeting.
That's true.
And what it does do, it's very specific as far as what's required. And what throws a really confusing wrench into this is the Oregon administrative rules, in my opinion, as far as the archival or the retention periods. And so it's not like you can just make a few little notes because we can always go back to the audio or the video. The administrative rules don't read like that. And you can have interpretations, but they're saying that, number one, a audio or video is not a permanent record. They don't, because the material used on a DVD and so forth, that they will break down, and that's why they, not just the state of Oregon, gets into these retention periods, and they have pages and pages and pages, so that it reduces written minutes and it identifies them specifically in a section of the administrative rules are permanent. And
What
then
about
it goes,
microfilm?
wait a minute. Okay. Then it identifies, okay, what permanent is and what permanent isn't, and what a video or audio is, and it says once you have created that permanent record, then you still have to keep the video or audio that you used for a period of 1 or 2 years after that. But back to your question, microfilm. But microfilm is something that you're going to reduce text to microfilm. So you're
Still
back
have
to
to do the
written. It's
text.
not that you can take
Gotcha.
the audio and create microfilm, or the video and create microfilm. So that gets, I think, more expensive.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it's recognized for archival purposes, but it's very expensive.
Don't want to
So
go there.
my suggestion, again, I'm going back to what County Council said here. We look at this. I would, so that we cannot. Could John Jesuit take this 19 pages, okay, and reduce it down, I think in a couple of hours perhaps, to what he would perceive would suffice, and then we look at
Do a
5
side-by-side-
pages or 3 or
side-by-side
6 or
comparison.
7, yeah.
Okay.
Rather than
You still have, excuse me, I'm sorry.
rather than us say, well, let's do this, then I think that would be a couple or 3 hours very well spent, and an actual side by side, and I think we would probably agree, yes.
We
it
may
will
not be able to
suffice.
make it by the meeting on the 21st because the deadline for that is today. And that's something I would like to sort of change topics, but
Yeah.
I think we're fixing to have a June 28th regular business meeting.
Yeah.
And I would like the board to, allow me to notice such a thing and put out and just tell all the departments that we're going to have one last extra meeting. Apparently the agenda for the 21st is really large, and I think we're going to have to break it up. And I think just the number of public hearings on some of our budgets and some of our other documents, there's several of those. So I think we're heading to that. So it's possible with what you say that we could have it back on the 28th so that we could really, we've been kind of, our minutes have been backed up and we need to get them starting flowing again. So John, I saw him nod his head that he thinks he could give you a side-by-side comparison of these 19
in his
versus
discretion,
Yep.
because it's in the discretion of the person that's creating the minutes, and
Well,
it has to be.
He creates them, but also the board reviews them, and the board, prior to final approval,
Well,
would have the option to
sure.
say, please add this, or please add that, or correct this, or correct that. So it's a group process, but it starts with
But
with
this
John Jesuit.
would just continue with his he did this, let's not us get
Yeah.
in the middle of it
Micromanage, as it were.
and see what he comes back
I think
with,
Commissioner
not
Boyce
us.
had some comments, and then
And then
Commissioner Gold, or
Commissioner
vice
Gold.
versa.
So Commissioner Boyce?
Thank
Commissioner
you.
Gold.
How secure are the videos? I mean, that might be an academic question, but I don't know.
I think they're
When you
hosted offline, or they?
Well, I think they're secure,
I understand the age process, but
but it has more to do, when you get into the statutes and the rules, it has more to
Were you
do
gonna-
with retention
Charles, were you going to talk
and
about how secure the
archives.
videos are?
But they're, I'm not sure what you mean when you say how secure.
well, just
Does it have to do with the length or the life of them, or what?
let's bring him in, and I think he might be able to answer that.
What is it?
Thank you.
What was your
Well,
question?
he'll say.
I'll complete when he's done.
Charles Douglas from Brand Media. Very unorthodox to appear and speak during a meeting I'm operating, so I'll try to not repeat this incident. But in general, we are backing up in triplicate all files of all meetings. So they exist on the cloud, and you have a contract with that service provider, Telview, that is a secure storage facility that they're not just going to lose. We also keep local copies of all your minutes.
What does
both-
local
or
mean?
Your minutes or videos. Local as in on-site here,
Okay.
and we also keep them in a separate Dropbox virtual cloud system that's my colleague Nick Brandt maintains. So we pretty much have everything you've ever done video-wise in triplicate.
Through clouds and here, wow.
So
Sure.
because literally the channel server, what's replaying all of your content, both the PSAs, the state legislature, all the Curry County content, the FEMA workshop, and so forth, all that exists and will continue to persist on your channel server as long as we replay these items. In fact, all your meetings that we have from 2016 are still in there as well.
I thought that was probably your answer as far as backup
Yeah.
go, and I appreciate that. And Mr. Chair, I'm satisfied with my questions answered.
Commissioner Gold.
My only other comment, if
Thanks, Charles.
JJ or John were to come up with a template for meetings or minutes, then if Fran Shrivner decides that she wants to do it, she can at least have a template of the type of things that we want.
Absolutely.
Sure, I think we would expect that, Commissioner Boyce.
Why do we need a volunteer? I think we just solved the problem here.
Thank you. Part of what we were talking about the volunteer was for perhaps looking backwards.
Oh,
The backlog from
Great,
that have
okay.
been undone. It would again, and
sorry I missed that.
that's okay. No, that's okay. It was kind of free flow.
And were you through?
Yes, sir.
Okay. One additional suggestion, and I know I've talked probably just in passing to John Jesuit on this, is that it would, I think, be not just suggested but essential, and it should have been done some time back, but to make the $500 or whatever purchase is necessary to buy the proper equipment and earphones and whatever to play back anything like that transcribers use all the time, that makes it so much easier
Yes, it does.
to, oh, stop, now I've got to go back a little bit, and back and forth. It's the right piece, the right tool for the right job, to do the job properly. I would really encourage that.
Very good. Well, then that's all we had. It sounds like we've got direction. My understanding is that John Jesuit and I, and John primarily, will work on making a side-by-side comparison of the April 5th, so that on the 28th you can give him some further direction, and we'll get these minutes going.
Okay. Commissioner Boyce?
Do you have a time frame on the remaining minutes that we do need to complete? Just maybe a general goal that we could.
I'm not sure. Can you keep asking? I'm not tracking your exact question. when you
The
say give me a
minutes that are
time
not
frame.
complete prior, we're
Oh.
going to try and find assistants to go back and do that. I mean,
It
even a
could be
year would
year's-
be
It could
6
be
months.
a year's worth of minutes.
Oh,
so
yes, okay.
probably over 100 hours of meetings, and then if it is hour for hour, 100 hours worth of possibly volunteer time. That's just
Let's
off
just
the
say
cuff
we're aware of the problem and
stuff. Yeah,
Well, and then there's another problem. We could not possibly
approve and
approve
review.
or disapprove the minutes simply because we weren't on the job at that point in time.
That's an interesting point. Yeah.
That's why we'd
Yeah.
looked, and I interfaced with county council, and this goes back with minutes that have not been done, goes back, I stopped at 5 years back.
Yeah.
Okay, 5
so,
years.
But for now, I think going forward, we'll work as directed. The other part, I think, is a thornier and more of a question mark.
Okay, and I'm happy to hear that we're going to kind of close the gap on that. I
Yeah.
think that's something we can kind of hang our hat on and should. How did you get these minutes? I just got them today.
I got them today too.
How did I get them?
Yeah.
I printed them out off online.
Okay.
That's
Oh, there
I
were
had
some
my own-
online. That's true.
That's
Hold
where
on
I
a
got
minute.
them.
question.
When you say
Thank you.
they are online, John Jesuit or someone,
printed
can you
them
say where they
before
are
the-
online? What does that mean? Oh, they're in the, so, all right, Commissioner,
Yeah.
so if you go on to your,
Yeah.
okay,
No, I
thank you.
didn't need-
All right, very good. That's
Commissioner
all,
Gold and I are trying to catch up on.
that's all we had. Is there's anything else? We're
John.
through.
There'll
Oh,
be a general meeting on June 28th then?
yes, it will be, because we're gonna need to
10 a.m.
conduct business, 10 a.m. And I'll put the notice out, or maybe you could, to let all the department heads know we'll have another meeting so that they can have a deadline and they can get their action items.
And I'm assuming that there may be some items that some people may think are going to be on the 21st that
We'll let 'em
will
know.
end up being
Yeah.
on the 28th.
Yep.
I understand.
And for me, so when we put together the meeting for the 21st, the primary will be Louise Kallstrom's budget and public hearing items that have already been noticed and whatnot.
May I, Mr. Chair, may I ask if all care is going to be in that? Do you know yet?
That's going to be on the 20th.
I,
We met
Could we
yesterday.
postpone that to the 28th?
Thank you. I'm gonna,
That would
so there were 3 things I was gonna put on for the 21st. I think one would be all care, the other would be a contract with Louise Kallstrom, and the third was going to be one other item. But what I have to do is I will look at all the items that have been submitted for the 21st and make some decisions. In my opinion, the all care has been going on for over a year, and I don't see what another
We
week
have some-
of time on that. Why, again, I
We
think.
have some presenters,
Yep.
Mr. Council, Mr. Huddle, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
That we're going to scramble to try and get something to the board on the 21st. So if they had that extra week would be, I guess I'll make that in the form of a request.
They were
Sure.
trying to get it on the
Yeah,
21st, or you mean, or today?
No, the 21st. But
Right,
it would
to
have to
get
be
in
on the
today.
agenda
Oh,
today.
today,
And
yeah.
so that's,
I don't, I mean, be that as it may, I don't know that that's gonna be
what's one more
informative of
week?
it. Right, I don't think that, I don't want them to get their hopes up. I don't think the item is about, granting requests for all care funds by the Board of Commissioners. It's a different item, but they'll probably be able to talk about it no matter what as a normal course in our meetings. But I honestly, in my mind, all care would be one that could be continued because it doesn't have a lot of time urgency, so.
And it's not going to be a big,
All right.
lengthy agenda item. So
No.
could we get consensus on that to
Well, I'll
continue the 28th?
That's kind of, it's not even, it doesn't need to be continued. That's
'Cause
what I'll be
but
doing
see, I have to
for
get it on
now.
the agenda, so.
Oh, I see. Well,
Or maybe it's going to be on the agenda. I can just defer to you on that and just.
well, it
I'll
will
know
be,
Friday.
Mr. Commissioner, it'll be, as the chair said, some folks have already submitted items for the agenda of the 21st that are going to be bumped, and I will be noticing everyone
Okay.
what's not going to be on the 21st.
Okay.
And as I just talked, in my mind, all care makes sense not to be on the 21st.
Okay.
So likely 28th.
Look what I found in the cafeteria.
Yeah, I know. All right, that's all I had though, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to adjourn the meeting at 12:06.
Okay, thanks everyone.